The biggest event in history has occurred. His Holiness Maharishi Mahesh Yogi spent his whole life trying to create world peace. He said in the back of his mind he always had the thought of creating a permanent group of 10,000 people practicing his advanced mental techniques in order to very suddenly bring heaven to earth. And we're now on the verge of fulfilling that goal and a lot more. Not just one group of 10,000 people, a permanent group, but many groups of 10,000 people each are now forming to create world peace and bring heaven to earth using Maharishi's techniques. They will establish this by radiating their influence of inner orderliness and brainwave coherence into the atmosphere all over the world. The effects from these groups has been scientifically tested to work, and I'll briefly explain the physics behind it in a moment. In science, this effect of coherence is always called, it was always called the 1% effect, where we start with a disorderly system and we introduce 1% order to the system. And then suddenly, the whole system switches over to become perfectly orderly, starting with 1%. Scientists call this sudden shift in a laboratory setting a phase transition. It's the same principle on a macroscopic scale with increased order on the world population. In early studies using the TM technique in small towns in North Carolina, and this is before Maharishi brought out the TM Cities program, we found that when 1% in all of those towns were practicing the TM technique, the crime rates dropped in those cities. After Maharishi brought out the more powerful TM Cities techniques, he said that the techniques are so powerful that the number needed to bring order to the entire world would not have to be 1% of the population, but only the square root of 1% of the world population, if the techniques were practiced in a group. The shift to order into the whole system, science calls it the 1% effect or the superradiance effect. In this case of human consciousness, and using only the square root of 1% of the world population, it's called the Maharishi effect. Maharishi is not a guru. He's a Maharishi, translated as great rishi, great seer, and given that title by the saints in India who first heard him speak and who recognized his unique ability to cognize creation arising out of the silence of that unified field within us all. That's what a seer does, a rishi. The infinite field of pure consciousness lying at the foundation of the entire universe arises as vibration. The original sounds are the older Sanskrit language, the language of nature. A Maharishi incarnates for the purpose of saving a planet from destruction and creating a golden age of perfection on any planet. He spent his entire life bringing TM to the world and began by multiplying himself by creating teachers of the TM technique and building a group of pundits to chant the Vedic verses to bring on this world change. The same Vedic verses that arise out of that silence that a seer can cognize, that structures all of creation. These are the sounds chanted, memorized from birth by the pundits who perform these ceremonies. The first scientifically measured group to change the world was in 1983, when Maharishi formed a group of 8,000 practitioners of his special techniques, the TM and TM City techniques. And during those 10 days, statistics showed, measured after the course, that the following problems decreased worldwide: war deaths, crime, traffic accidents reported by insurance companies, admissions to hospitals and mental hospitals, and the stock market soared. There were fewer bankruptcies filed, fewer divorces filed, and a host of other factors. A continuation of this program brought down the Berlin Wall. Gorbachev came to power. The Soviet Union and its restrictive government collapsed. Gorbachev was planning to eliminate nuclear arms. During this time, even the least spiritual in the world began to think we were entering the New Age prophesied for thousands of years. The first group eventually had to go back to their homes, to their responsibilities. But they demonstrated what is called a taste of utopia. And then, of course, things reverted. Gorbachev lost power, and then Putin came in. Then in December of 2023, we held a conference in India. A group of 11,000 Sidhas for 2 weeks, in buildings, and where we establish groups for peace now. The effect on world consciousness from this group coherence, from this powerful center of India, brought the attention of 7 spiritual groups in India who came during the celebrations and listened and spoke. These visitors decided to bring their own meditators to learn Maharishi's techniques and join the groups to create permanent peace throughout the world. Among them, Sai Baba's organization, creating a group of not 10 or 11,000, but 16,000. And Ammaji's organization, creating a group of 2 million. All of them learning Maharishi's advanced techniques to usher in heaven on earth. And more groups forming throughout the world. This is the rising tide of world peace Maharishi worked on his whole life, and which is now coming to fruition. Maharishi has accomplished his goal. So, who cares who wins the election? All man-made governments are about to end, and we'll have a new form of government, perfect government. And all tyrants here and all over the world will vanish. More details in part 2.